Gonna do, get my mic's on. Okay. Gonna do a little bit longer of a live today just because I have more time. Um, Hopefully this is something I can find time for more and more. It's really just I have to be more responsible with the time I do have. I don't know. It's difficult to manage your time while trying to be creative at the same time. I think um, for me, creativity takes a priority. For me, I'm always going to act with creativity instead of forcing things. So I really haven't worked out a balance with that yet, but as we continue to go, as we continue to try these things, it'll start to get better. What's up, K Dot? How's everything? Nice to see you. Is this a good time for you, man? I know you've been complaining about me streaming later, but yeah, like the best part about this is like not that I'm done for the day after this, but usually when I stream, like I can't go to sleep for like an hour or two after. So if I stream late, it's like I'm up all night. Just something like my adrenaline goes high or something, or the things where you like, well, what is what's a good way to say this? Like when you do something and your energy is just spiked for the next like few hours for whatever reason, like streaming gives me that sort of energy. Maybe it's because I have to like perform, or maybe it's because I have to like stay sharper than I normally would. But yeah, it's almost 8:30 p.m. for you. It's a good time. Okay, okay. Yeah, I think right now I'm gonna do a bunch of different times. For some reason you can't see the screen. Uh, I don't know what to tell you. It's on for me. I just refreshed it, but let me know if it's still not working. What's up, Ashley? How's it going? How's everyone doing today? I feel like I don't say that enough in my lives. Um, we usually just get started because I don't know if anyone's here yet, but today we have people, so it's nice. It's a nice change for me just talking in the first 5 minutes. But yeah, I was gonna start off this stream by talking about uh, what I'm reading right now. So what I'm reading is the Red Book by Jung. I just want to talk about a few interesting ideas I've stumbled across. Um, so the basis of the book, how's my Wednesday going? It's pretty good. I haven't had to do anything. I got woken up by a fire alarm. So like literally as I'm like dead asleep, I get woken up by a voice telling me I have to go outside. It's like it was much worse than just like the screeching because it was like the most monotone and annoying voice, and I heard it for 10 minutes because it's cold as fuck out and I had to put on stuff to go outside. So aside from that, my day's been pretty good. But it was good because it would have taken me much longer to get going in the morning because how tired I was. So, I guess things happen for a reason, right? I'm streaming right now at the time I'm streaming right now because I had to go to the gym, I had to eat, I had to do all these things. So it would have been later. I would have had less time. So I don't know. I feel like I kind of have to start approaching things in that way, start looking at things for the good. I know I always talk about it, but sometimes it's like it's hard in the moment. It's always easier as a third person perspective to give advice, but actually in the moment, finding that advice for yourself and following through on it, that's the real difference maker. But yeah, anyway, so this book is really, really good. So far it's one of my new favorite books, I can tell you already. Um, it's like Jung's other works, but it's a deeper level. It's a more mystical experience. It's when you read Jung, it's not saying he classifies people, but it's more scientific. It's less open for interpretation. Whereas this book is basically him talking to, I guess you would call it projections or entities or things that have appeared because of his unconscious, and they're explaining basic fundamental parts of life that he's seemingly not understanding. Are you a morning person or evening person? It honestly depends. There's periods where I'm a morning person, and there's periods when I am a uh, night person. My girlfriend ruined my sleep schedule, so right now I'm a night person. But if I get onto a more disciplined sleep schedule, I'll become a morning person again. That's what I'm trying to do, but it's difficult because it's just like sometimes like if you plan out your day in advance, you have to do stuff in the morning. Sometimes I don't wake up early enough, so I'll just do it at night, and then that means I wake up late. I don't know. That's one thing I'm trying to iron out right now. But basically, what this book is talking about is it's a deeper level of Jung's understanding. Jung understands everything when it comes to the material world, but this is him understanding the spiritual world. It's the neglected aspect of him that is beginning to rise up, and he's beginning to recognize these influences. Yeah, if you go to sleep at 2 a.m., you're not waking up anytime before 10. Even waking up at 10 is difficult when you go to sleep at 2 a.m. I don't know. I feel like anytime that you go to sleep past 2 a.m., you're not going to wake up early. Unless you're an insane person that can go on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I have a friend who sleeps like 3 to 4 hours a night. And he literally sleeps the entire weekend to make up for it. And I'm just like, why don't you just sleep a few hours more every night instead of ruining your entire weekend? It baffles me how this dude just lives like that. But it is what it is. I don't get it. I could never do that myself. But to each their own. But yeah, anyway, this book is so interesting. I cannot wait to get through it. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. But so far from what I've read, it's really inspiring, and it's basically Young coming to grips with certain realities he hasn't faced. One of them was talking about the anima in particular, where it was saying that the traits that you look for in someone else, you have to give to yourself. The things that you desire in a partner, the things you desire in a wife, are the traits that you must accept because until you accept these traits will always rule you. In the moment you most need to be stable, you're going to become more emotional, vice versa for a woman. The moment when you're supposed to be more emotional, more empathetic, you're going to become more rational, more cutthroat, and it's just an interesting book so far. And some of the things like I don't want to misquote. At some point, I might go through some of the chapters. At some point, I might go through some of the words. Let me see if I can find something interesting. Where am I? I should have taken a picture of this stuff earlier. Yeah, it talks about a lot of esoteric stuff, and it talks about Gnosticism as well. So, just overall good book. We'll get into the videos though now. You're not proud of your sleeping pattern. I don't think anyone that goes to bed that late is, to be honest. Um, I think most people that go to bed late, a lot of it's like a cope. There are definitely people that are night owls, but it might just be because like you have to be part of society that makes it so difficult. Like whereas if you were just on your own schedule, but I think your body likes the sunlight. I think your body likes the natural circadian rhythm, and when you start to mess it up, it starts to cause other issues. Yeah, yeah. I mean, your body's used to like it follows these patterns, and it basically once you give it a certain stimulus, it's going to continue to repeat it. That's why the moment you start drinking coffee is the moment you start drinking coffee for the rest of your life. You can overcome these habits, but your body likes the predictability of things, so it gives you that feedback, it gives you that stimulus. Yeah, we'll get into the videos. Someone on their channel asked me to make a video about Camus, and I did that. So if you want to check that out, we won't even watch it now, but um, basically Camus is an absurdist. So what absurdism is the recognition that nothing has any meaning, nothing has any purpose. It's very much like nihilism or existentialism, but instead of getting all up in arms, instead of having a nervous breakdown, the absurdist laughs, the absurdist smiles, the absurdist finds the joy and how funny it is that everything's meaningless and the meaninglessness gives everything meaning. That's the basic idea of it. It's very similar to Taoism in a sense, but it's not so connected with the natural nature of life that's not so much spiritual, it's more so rational. But it is an interesting philosophy. Let me know if you guys can hear this.
L'étranger, The Stranger, or The Outsider is a 1942 novel by
This is a very good book. It's about 100 pages. I bet you could find it online for free. This is something I think if you haven't really read any fiction and you like philosophy, this is a great book to read because it's almost Dostoevsky-esque because there's not really that strong of a narrative. Obviously, it's a good narrative. It develops well, but while you're reading it, you're just like, okay, this is just like all build up and then it culminates and then it gets to something very introspective, something very much a commentary of society and very much a commentary on, is someone ever guilty? Is someone ever, so evil, or is it they just aren't comprehending life in the same manner as everyone else?
French author Albert Camus. Though it is a work of fiction, it is often cited as an example of Camus'
You
philosophy
can
of
hear it, okay.
absurdism. The Stranger has had a profound impact on millions of readers through the story of an ordinary man
Why is this? Why is Frodo in this? Am I like is this weird? Like, why is Frodo?
unwittingly
I don't
drawn
get
into
it.
his senseless murder on an Algerian beach. Camus explored what he termed the nakedness of man faced with the absurd. Merceau, an indifferent French Algerian, is the protagonist of The Stranger, to whom the novel's title refers. The novel begins, Maman died today. Or yesterday, maybe. I don't know. I got a telegram.
So this whole time, I don't know if this guy's gonna explain it, but this whole time, the protagonist of the story, I guess we're gonna spoil the Stranger, but if you haven't read The Stranger, um, this really isn't gonna do it justice because this book is very deep. You can know the story, but I think you have to read every single detail to really parse it out for yourself because the entire time you're going to be pretty sympathetic to the stranger Mersault. You're going to be pretty sympathetic to him. He kind of has like an okay justification for everything. Yeah, he's kind of just I wouldn't say a Debbie Downer. He kind of just goes through the flow. He doesn't really put too much emphasis on anything. And because of this, he comes off as cold. Because of this, he comes off as weird to other people. But it's more so just like he doesn't he doesn't see the value in things. He doesn't see the value in relationships. Like his mother was dying, she really wasn't the same person anymore. He couldn't really afford to give her a better life, so like he's almost ashamed to visit her. And all of these things go into the way he acts around her death, but it's not brought up when he's on trial. Are you on live tomorrow? Yeah, I'll go live
From the
tomorrow.
home, mother deceased, funeral
Tomorrow I
tomorrow,
can
faithfully
only go
yours.
live
That
later
doesn't
though.
mean anything.
I just
Maybe
don't
it
have time
was
during the day.
yesterday. Right from the start, we can
But
see Merceau's
Friday I'll be streaming probably around the same time. I might even stream twice. Depends on what I have to do.
emotional indifference and detached personality. An aspect that is often lost in translation is that he uses the child's word maman, literally mommy, instead of the more adult mother. Camus wrote in his notebooks that the curious feeling the son has for his mother constitutes all his sensibility. Merceau is asked if he wants to see his mother who is sealed in the coffin. He declines the offer. During the vigil, he drinks coffee and smokes cigarettes next to the coffin. Jung
Again, none of these things are like necessarily weird. It's just someone who is more so detached and someone who doesn't really follow conventions, but it gets twisted in a different way later on. Wow, you gotta go. That's crazy. I'm just messing with you. Nah, I got you. I got you. Thanks for hanging out here, kid. Thanks for joining. It's always nice to talk to you.
his indifference to his mother's death. That night, he happily arrives back in Algiers. The next day, he goes to the beach for a swim. There, he runs into Marie, his former co-worker. They go to watch a comedy at the movie theater that evening and spend the night together. Throughout the novel, Marie asks him if he loves her, and he simply replies that it didn't mean anything, but probably not. She also asks him if he wants to marry her. He replies in
Psycholog Psychologists and their weird relationships with their mothers. It's literally just I mean, Camus didn't have a weird relationship with his mother. Camus was pretty well adjusted. It's just Freud that had that. Have a good stream and a good day. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the Oedipus complex is very weird. It's right in a certain sense because people that have neuroses, they usually derive somewhat from the devouring mother ideal, the idea that um, they can't step out on their own, that they need their mother to help them through things. And this is a big thing, especially for men nowadays. You see the classic trope of, oh, this guy still lives in his mother's basement. He can't overcome this need for nurtureship. He can't step out on his own and become his own support system. You see this in a lot of men who have like weird relationship breakdowns where they can't just um, accept that the person that they're with is imperfect. They need absolute support. They need undying loyalty. They need, something above and beyond what a human being can give them. This is a damaged relationship with the anima. And this is why, in essence, Freud's Oedipus complex was correct because every man kind of wants to outdo their father and they want to marry their mother in a sense, but it's a archetypal image sense. It's like you want someone who holds the same values as your mother because that's what you associate in the other gender. That's what there's a deep calling for you to seek out. It's not necessarily even a bad thing. Just one of those things you wish to remain oblivious to. I mean, it's not necessarily wrong. Like you think it's a good thing if you have a good relationship with your parents that you want something similar, that your relationships kind of form the basis for what you're going to seek in a relationship, but it becomes destructive when you have a destructive household. I mean, it's really a sad thing because I mean, even with my dad, like he didn't have a good role model growing up. He didn't have a good influence in the masculine sense. So like there was a lot of times he mishandled things trying to teach me how to be a man, trying to inspire me to become all I could. Like he used the tough love approach, but his dad also did the same thing. It's like the sins of the father pass to the son, and then that son becomes a father, and then it passes to the next son, and you have to just break the chain. I think a lot of people take the traumas that their parents give them and they don't create something better. That's really all life is. Life is all just alchemy, transmuting your trauma into something that's triumphant instead of allowing it to break you down. I mean, you can be broken down by everything in life, but if you build yourself back up, isn't that a good thing? Like, shouldn't you want more things to go wrong at a certain point? Like, shouldn't you want some sort of failure because then you can actually experience happiness in the end? Like, what is life if you experience absolute undying success for the rest of your life? It's not fun. You don't appreciate it. You don't understand what it would be like if it was in the opposite direction. Therefore, you're going to continue to want more and more and more and more. And you can't appreciate and be gracious for what you have now.
Differently, but says that they can get married if she wants to, so they become engaged. Maxwell has an encounter with one of his neighbors who curses and beats his mangy dog. One day he laments that his dog has run away and can be heard weeping in the night, longing for its return. This strong grief over someone losing his dog contrasts with Maxwell's indifference at losing his mother. The climax of the novel takes part on a Sunday trip to a beach house. The sun was starting to burn my cheeks.
It's when you look at stuff like that, I'm pretty sure his mother was diminished capacity, and a certain response that a lot of people do is when they're older relatives, when people in their lives are dying, they don't want to accept that that's them. They don't want to accept the natural aging process, and they would rather remember them for who they were. So they start to see them as a shell of that person and not give them the same respect they used to. That's probably what that is. Most of these things are like deep, deep, like psychological ideas, but um, when you're on trial, when you're in the court, you can't really defend these things. And this is what this is all building to. It's building to an event that basically is going to put his whole life on trial, and people are going to see it in a much different way.
And I could feel drops of sweat gathering in my eyebrows. The sun was the same as it had been the day I buried Mama, and like then, my
The reason why like animals dying is so sad is one because they don't really have the capacity to um, do anything. A lot of animals nowadays are reliant on their their owners. A lot of animals, like they would do anything for their owners. I mean, unless you're a cat, like cats will eventually eat you if you die, whereas your dog will also just wait by your side until, maybe someone comes and adopts it, or, I mean, we've all heard these stories of like people passing away and then they're found weeks later and then their dog also died of starvation or their cat ate them. Like it's just there's just an innocence that dogs have where they're so fiercely loyal and they're so like just happy to be around you, and they're such a warming presence that it almost makes like animals dying sadder because I mean they only live for so long, whereas people have their entire lives to experience life. This is why it's so sad when someone young dies because they weren't really given the shot to experience everything. Whereas if someone's 80 years old and dies, it's very sad, don't get me wrong, but it's there's no question of what if. There's no question of could they have done something great? Could they have done this? Could they have done that? There's less of that impact. It's like at a certain point you're like, all right, it was gonna happen one day and it was today.
Forehead especially was hurting me, all the veins in it throbbing under the skin. It was this burning which I couldn't stand anymore. That made me move forward. I knew that it was stupid, that I couldn't get the sun off me by stepping forward, but I took a step, one step forward, and this time, without getting up, the Arab drew his knife and held it up to me in the sun. The light shot off the steel and it was like a long flashing blade cutting at my forehead. My whole being tensed and I squeezed my hand around the revolver. The trigger gave. I knew I had shattered the harmony of.
So this is a scene later on in the book where basically he goes to the beach and a fight breaks out because basically this guy he was hanging out with was a pimp and he was abusing this other guy's sister, and the fight broke out because the sister told the brother that this guy was mistreating her, and then basically this fight goes on. He takes the revolver, he goes back to see the guy that was injured, and he just shoots him for no reason really. Like it kind of he kind of just gets scared. He kind of just panics in the moment, and then this one mistake ultimately leads to his
The
imprisonment.
day. The
It's
exceptional
not really
silence
supposed to.
among.
It's not really supposed to make sense. That's the whole point of it. It's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be like he's a hero. It's not supposed to be like he did it in self-defense. It's supposed to be like perhaps the other guy was going to attack him, but he didn't give him the opportunity for that.
Beach where I had been happy. Then I fired 4 more times at the motionless body, where the bullets lodged without leaving
See,
a
it's
trace.
these details are very important because they're going to paint him like a monster, where really he's. I wouldn't say it's a psychotic break, but it's a major lapse of judgment, and he's not really an evil person. He's not really someone that is malicious. He's just someone that feels lost.
And it was like knocking 4 quick times at the door of unhappiness. Mixor kills a man whom he did not know, an involuntary and absurd act. The sun merely struck his knife, sweat was running in his eyes. From this moment, he enters the world of judgment, and the world of judgment is the discovery of man. Mixor is arrested and thrown into jail. His lack of remorse over his crime, and in particular, his lack of grief at his mother's funeral, makes people think of him as a complete stranger.
They they basically paint him out to be some kind of monster. Like there was someone that I think either there was like a malicious crime. It was something like he killed a family member. There was another trial, and the judge at one point goes, "This guy might have done something, but he did it out of love. He did it out of compassion, whereas you did it out of nothingness, and that is more sick than anything." And it really like they're not really putting him on trial for the crime. They're putting him on trial for his life more
In
so.
prison, he is tormented by the isolation from nature, women, and cigarettes. When I was first imprisoned, the hardest thing was that my thoughts were still those of a free man. For example, I would suddenly have the urge to be on a beach and to walk down the water. He eventually adapts, sharing his mother's attitude that after a while you could get used to anything. In the courtroom, Massault is seen as a monster, and people believe that the emptiness of his heart threatens to swallow up society. His lack of belief in God gives him the nickname Monsieur Antichrist. Massault is afflicted by the madness of sincerity. distinguished by his never wanting to say more than he feels. When asked if he grieved at his mother's burial, he neither admits nor denies having grieved. It is this tenacious refusal.
Very weird because like it could have just been shock. When you're reading this, you're just like, or at least this was my thought. Like people grieve differently. There's a lot of people that first deny it. Um, Whenever I've lost anyone in my life, I don't want to believe it at first. I like to think it's a dream. And there's a period where that's the case to me, then I begin to actually start grieving. So it's just weird. Like obviously the guy's grieving, but he's not expressing it. It's buried somewhere.
This fascination with the
Again, this was written in
authenticity
the
of
time
what one
before
is and
psychology,
what one
so
feels that gives meaning to the entire novel. When
this
asked why he
was
had killed the Arab,
how would I search up a Netflix series? When was this written? Bro, you gotta be joking. They're showing Netflix series instead of like this masterpiece. 1942. Yeah, this is way before the time when psychology was a more well accepted thing.
he says that it was because of the son. People
It's
laugh
weird
at
because
him. Eventually,
if you look into the origins of psychology, it really comes out of hypnosis, hypnotherapy. It's very weird to think that something so accepted is derived from something that is not accepted nowadays. The issue with hypnotherapy, this is what Jung said. He said it has great effects, but it's not long lasting. Whereas if you actually get to the root of the unconscious, you can actually cure things for good. But hypnotherapy, you can only temporarily cure things. So
he is found guilty and is sentenced to death by guillotine. This shows one of the forms of the absurd, a young man who wants to live but is condemned to die. While waiting for his execution, he struggles to come to terms with his situation, and he has trouble accepting the certainty and inevitability of his fate. He is visited by the chaplain, who tries to make him renounce his atheism and turn to God, but he refuses. Instead, he declares that he is correct in believing in a meaningless, purely physical world. The major themes of the book include the importance of the physical world, the meaninglessness of human life, and the irrationality of the universe.
I think Camus' philosophy is much stronger in his actual philosophical works. I think there's some holes in The Stranger itself. Um, Perhaps it's different if you're supposed to think that Mersault is a sympathetic protagonist or he's someone you kind of have to look to with empathy, whereas like he went wrong in some places. I'm not exactly sure the intent of it, but to me, it's an interesting story. But at the same time, there's I will watch.
It's a fact that for most of our lives, we humans unconsciously bask in ignorance. But sometimes
This is Plato's Cave Allegory. I don't know if it explained it.
special people come
This is
along to wake
Kierkegaard
us
right
from
here.
this state that some would call bliss. In fact, the myth of the hero who brings wisdom, symbolized by light or fire, in a world of ignorance symbolized by darkness, is as old as humanity itself and can be found in all cultures across works of literature and art. Take, for example, Plato's allegory of the cave. People usually learn about it in school when they make their first contact with the philosophers of old. But most of
It's so upsetting to me that we don't learn about older philosophers. Really, the only new-ish philosophers you should learn are Camus and Nietzsche. I guess Jung, if you consider him a philosopher. I don't think anyone in the past few hundred years has maybe Emerson or Thoreau. There's definitely more names you can add in there, but nowadays what we consider philosophy is just bastardized versions of old schools of thought. I mean, if you look into Taoism, Taoism is one of the most complete philosophical systems. And nowadays people just emphasize Stoicism. It's like, where do you think the ideas of Stoicism came from? Where do you think these ideas derive from? Every single ancient Greek philosopher studied in the East first. What's up, HN? How's everything, man? Look who it is that my favorite bald man. I better be. If I'm your second favorite, I know you go to the wrong website. Or maybe you like The Rock more than me. I don't know. I don't know. Who's like a bald guy that is like maybe Joe Rogan. I don't know. Trying to think. I should be up there. I should be up there for most people.
Most of us are too young and inexperienced to fully understand its profound meaning and teachings until way later in life, when we start to question the reality that has been programmed into us and to form our own beliefs and values. When this moment comes, having a roadmap for the journey that one has to undertake and
Could be
becoming aware
better.
of the obstacles that
Why could you be better? Come on, man. Get a smile. I'm doing pretty good today. I don't have a lot to do. I have a big gap before I have any other real responsibilities. So, yeah, cool. You actually hate Joe? Why do you hate him? What's up, Dylan? Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's weird hearing that. Like, sometimes it's just like, yeah, I just like to talk about things I like to talk about. So, the fact that anyone is interested in the things I like to talk about sometimes is like, it's just cool to hear. I don't know. I think Joe Rogan is like, the only thing I can say about him is he's so mainstream that it becomes cringe. And that's really the downfall with most people. If you look at Jordan Peterson, like 10 years ago, you listen to him talk about Pinocchio and he's talking about the devouring mother, and you're like, this is the most interesting fucking thing I've ever heard. And now you hear him just talk about normal politics, and you're like, all right, bro, you're basically just Ben Shapiro with a psychology twist to it. You live in Syria, of course. All right. I I guess you're making a strong point. Yeah. Yeah, that's I don't know enough about the country, but um yeah, it sucks. Yeah. It sucks that like there's places in the world that just have less opportunity, less room to um do what you want with your time. And then less buying power. Like there's people in this country that don't deserve the blessings that America has, where you can basically work a job and do nothing. You can work in HR and make six figures. And then there's places in the world where you have to scrounge for everything that can get. You don't hate him as a person, you just hate his content. Okay, okay, that's fair, that's fair. Yeah, I like, dude, most of the people he has on are just so just boring. It's like, oh, there's this scientist that discovered absolutely nothing. Let me have him on the podcast. Oh, there's this unfunny comedian that just released a special. Oh my God, let's have Bert Kreischer on for the 1,000th fucking time. I'm sure he has a new story that he just invented that's absolutely hilarious. It's just, I don't know. It's like anything. After a while, it all gets old. Um, there's certainly good things about his stuff. There's certainly bad things. I mean, it's like anything. I just don't really find many things interesting anymore because when you read something like Jung, when you read something like Nietzsche, when you read something like Osho, like there's something fundamental to the entire human experience in there, and you're not getting that in Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? It would be like if I read a self-help book today. It's not going to help me today as much as it would a year ago. You kind of just evolve past these lower level ideas. There's nothing more than the shorts people take out of his podcast. Yeah, there's certain ones I would listen to. Um, like if there's a fighter, I listened to the Yuri Prohashka one. I think that's how you say his name. I listened to that one for like an hour. It was kind of interesting, but then I just got bored of it. It's like there's definitely certain people you really listen to him for the guest now. You don't really listen to him for him. That's what I don't get. Like there's millions of people that listen to every single episode, and the most of them are just fucking nonsense. Most of them are just boring. But again, that's just probably my attention span being destroyed by years and years of social media and then me reading um, philosophical books. Where if it's not questioning the nature of the universe, I'm not gonna be interested. Would you recommend a person to read daily? The good answer is 30 pages. If you read 30 pages a day, It's a pretty solid number. You'll get through a lot of books. It's not that difficult. Um, because what if a book's like 200 pages? That's one book a week. 4 books a month is pretty good. Um, and I would put that as a minimum. That's what I did for the longest time, and now it's like I'll read 100, 200. Sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's less, but like once you have the habit ingrained, you don't have to fixate on a certain number. But if you're really trying to get into reading, I would say do what you can now, but build up to that 30 number. 30 pages a day is pretty good. 30 pages of any book is pretty good. Certain books are gonna be harder. Like if I'm gonna read, um, if I'm gonna read the Bible, like it's gonna take me a lot longer to read 30 pages of the Bible because it's a philosophical allegorical work. Whereas if I read, what's something easy? If I was to read like I haven't read this book yet, but if I were to read this book, it's a novel. It's not philosophical. Maybe there's some philosophy in it, but it's purely story driven, so it would be very easy for me to read. There's also a lot of books that like do filler. So like 30 pages a day would probably be a good number. Um, but again, it also depends on the books you're reading, how much impact they'll have. There's certain books that if you reread several times, you'll get more out of it than anything else. Um, that's not my approach because I like to do a bunch of different books. I like to explore a bunch of different ideas, explore the same idea from different authors, and kind of piece it all together for me. But yeah, I would listen to Elon Musk or any contra controversial person. Is that what you're saying? Or countercultural? Yeah. I mean, dude, that's the problem with most podcasts. Most podcasts are just fucking boring. Like I can't tell you the last time I listened to a podcast just because they're all so it's just so stupid. It's like the new grift is like people paying to be on podcasts and then using those podcasts as clips and then clipping those up and then putting those into ads and then selling something. It's like, yeah, I just care about like the spread of information and the spread of good information. And like every time you see those memes of like podcast equipment should be banned, I start to agree with it because I mean, dude, I don't even have much to say for more than an hour a day. And it's like I've read thousands of books at this point. Like what information is some guy that listens to Joe Rogan gonna tell you? It's very weird to me, but I don't know. I think it's like if you are looking for information from a podcast, you're looking at the wrong source. Truly, the only thing that is going to develop you spiritually, mentally, and physically is a book. How can you find a good book? If you go on my Discord, I have a book list there. Go through any book on my channel. They're all really good books. I don't really recommend books that I don't like or that I don't think have value. Depends on the subject. Give me a subject and I can give you a bunch. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing for 3 hours. Yeah, most conversations that are had don't need to be more than 30 seconds. Um, again, it's like people need to spend the day somehow. At the very least, the thing about podcasts is at least they're trying to learn. At least you're trying to get better. And eventually, hopefully it leads into something more intellectual, something more developmental. Like for me, I started listening to podcasts first, then I started listening to books, then I started reading books. So like if it develops into a better habit because of that, great. Health? What kind of health? Holistic health or um what? What's this video about? I will I don't know how long I've been streaming for. I was talking about Jung earlier. I was talking about Camus earlier. Now we're going over Plato's cave allegory. It was just I'm just doing a bunch of different stuff today. I wasn't really talking about one thing. Maybe at some point we'll focus the stream onto something that is more specific, but I like to the way my brain works is I like to go to a bunch of different subjects. It's really boring to me to stay on the same subject for an hour straight because like I just said, you don't need a 3 hour conversation about any subject really. Hold on, I'm gonna turn my air off. But yeah, maybe I should start um doing like streams about certain things. But to be honest, it's just not fun for me to talk about the same thing. There's certain topics where if you get me going, I won't stop. But usually it's I like to be all over the place. That's definitely a problem that I should figure out because it's definitely hurt me in the algorithm because I've covered books from every subject, but that's just what I like to do. Like if I was sticking purely to philosophy, purely to esoteric stuff, purely to religious stuff, purely to self-help stuff, purely to I don't know, health stuff, I would get so fucking bored and I'd stop doing it. So it's just the variety really inspires me to keep going.
That may emerge is a thing of utmost importance. And in today's episode, in collaboration with After School, we are going to explore this journey by dissecting Plato's allegory of the cave, its connection to ancient myths, and the ultimate narrative archetype we know as the hero's journey.
Yeah, that's the hero's journey. Hey, if you guys aren't familiar with the hero's journey, this is just an idea that every single great story has this kind of arc where the hero starts out, they're looking for something, they're confused, they find someone to teach them, they get some sort of gift, they get some sort of weapon or something to take down the bad guy, they take down the bad guy, then they triumph. They triumph. I don't know why I said
Plato's
triumph.
allegory of the cave is one of the most influential
I'm like
philosophical
developing a
concepts ever
speech impediment
introduced,
as we speak.
encapsulating timeless questions about reality, knowledge, perception, and enlightenment. Located in Plato's seminal work, The Republic, the allegory of the cave serves as a metaphorical narrative depicting the human condition's journey from ignorance to enlightenment. Embedded within this allegory are profound implications about the nature of knowledge and the transformative journey of gaining wisdom. The narrative echoes through numerous myths and philosophical discourses, bearing a particularly striking resemblance to the
It's a weird picture. When most people gain any sort of knowledge, when most people gain any sort of information, the first thing they want to do is share it. But I think this is the worst idea. Unless you're, I'm such a hypocrite because that's literally what I do on my channel every day. But you need to apply the knowledge. You need to be an example. And once you're the example, then you can explain it. But the issue with trying to spread information is unless people ask, they're not going to change. And it's a waste of your time to try to force change on people. They need to want to change for themselves. And this is the real issue of it. Like people need to become so fed up with their situation that they're seeking this information before they'll ever accept anything new. And it sucks because I had so many friends that I've tried to help through the years. I've tried to um, tell them how I've gone through certain things. I've tried to, push them in a certain direction, and they didn't ask me for help. And this is why they're still where they are because had I just shut up, had I just, kept this relationship going and trying to urge them in the right direction through my actions instead of through my words, instead of trying to tell them, I could have just inspired them to do what I did. You know what I mean? It's like you have to trick people into doing something better for themselves. I'm not saying do this intentionally, but it has to be the indirect method. It has to be through your example that you change people. This is why I don't get a lot about Christian missionaries. They just go there and talk about Jesus. Whereas if you just prove that your religion makes you a better individual, that your belief, your faith brings you some sort of happiness and joy in life, wouldn't that be so much more convincing than me pointing to a verse in the Bible and being like, he died for our sins, he did like no. Give them a reason to be interested first, then you can explain the history, then you can explain the doctrines. But it's very frustrating to me.
Greek myth of Prometheus and the archetypal hero's journey. In Plato's profound allegory, he uses the metaphor of a subterranean cave to illustrate a group of prisoners sequestered from birth. Their world is one of complete isolation, devoid of any contact with the external universe. Bound by chains and restricted in their movements, they are compelled to face the barren cave wall, deprived of the ability to swivel their heads or see beyond their immediate environment. An enigmatic fire, positioned behind them, flickers dimly, barely illuminating their dreary surroundings.
So this is an allegory of how society shapes you. Society tells you to believe certain things. Society tells you to accept certain things. But it's not necessarily bad. because without these core fundamental beliefs, things really wouldn't work. It's just breaking away from these and becoming who you are and establishing yourself as someone that, you know, doesn't need these rules. A lot of these rules are just to keep people safe. A lot of conformity is to keep people safe. A lot of the things that make the system go round is because people can't govern themselves. But when you start to be able to govern yourself, this is when the rules don't really become beneficial to you, they become restrictive. This is the idea of the death of Socrates. Like Socrates wasn't being a revolutionary. Socrates wasn't doing anything except teaching people how to think. But this becomes dangerous when people who have never thought their whole lives begin to think and begin to become rebellious. Whereas Socrates would be very, very passive. He'd be probably a pacifist. I don't know. I'm just assuming things.
Surroundings. Periodically, individuals walk behind the prisoners, parading various figures. These are representations of animals, plants, and an array of other artifacts. These objects, when passing by the fire, cast elongated and distorted shadows on the stone wall before the prisoners. Having no other experiences, the prisoners mistake these dancing illusions for reality, categorizing them and assigning them names, erroneously believing that they are discerning, tangible entities. You can see where Plato is going with this. Unexpectedly, one prisoner's shackles are removed.
Everyone sees themselves in this. This is the point of Plato's allegory that a lot of people don't get. Each and every person has their own unique experience that they try to explain to people, but the truth is this experience is only true for them. You know what I mean? Like in order for me to see your complete worldview, I would have to experience every single thing through your perspective. I would have to experience every single emotion, every single time something went wrong. I will never fully understand you because I'm not you. And this is the real idea of it. It's the difference in perception.
And he is thrust into the world beyond the cave for the very first time. The moment is ripe for him to be tested. The intense brilliance of the sunlight initially hurts his eyes, and the unfamiliar environment bewilders him. When confronted with the fact that his former perception of reality was merely a distorted illusion, and that the things he now sees around him are the real objects, he starts to suffer, his previous reality being deconstructed before his very eyes. The mind that opens to a new idea never returns to its original size. The shadows he was familiar with appear.
That's a good thing though. Some people see it as a bad thing. So what social media feels like, yeah. Social media is dude, I don't know if this is just my feed, but Twitter in the past 2 weeks has just pissed me off so much. It just gets worse and worse and worse. There's no idea of nuance. There's no idea of anything aside from rage baiting. And half the people aren't rage baiting, half the people are. And it's like, dude, it's just utter filth. It's just there's no reason for any discussion on Twitter because it's just people insulting each other back and forth. And it's like it's not even funny most of the time. It's just so frustrating. Like I had a friend trying to, he was like sending me like posts of him like arguing with someone on the other side of the political sphere. And it's just like, he's like, I'm owning the libs. I'm like, dude, I don't care. Like, why are you sending me a random disagreement you had on TikTok? Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, you didn't prove anything. You didn't do anything except get yourself all riled up and all upset and get someone else all riled up and upset. Like you did nothing good today. You did nothing productive today. All you did was argue with someone who will never see your side of things. Argue with someone and have a discussion with someone that there's going to be no common agreement. And I don't see a point in that. I don't see talking to anyone if there's not at least a baseline level of respect for the other individual and a baseline level of respect for their perspective.
Much more vivid to him. However, as time progresses, his eyes slowly adapt to the overwhelming brightness, and his suffering slowly passes as he gets accustomed to his new perspective. Gradually, he starts perceiving reflections in shimmering water bodies, progresses to observing objects directly, and finally, he dares to gaze at the radiant sun, the ultimate source of light that illuminates everything he has been observing. Emboldened by his newfound understanding, the prisoner makes his way back to the cave, intending to share his.
Even if your way of life, even if your perspective, even if your reality is better, trying to explain that to someone who hasn't experienced it from for themselves will never know. And this is the issue with things like don't cast pearls before swine. This is a quote in the Bible, and it's really just there's no point in trying to explain things to someone who is not at the level where they would begin to perceive things, where they would begin to break their paradigms. There's no point in arguing with someone who doesn't even respect you as a human being.
Revelations with the other prisoners. However, having
Even
gained
if you can tell them
accustomed to the
something
light,
beneficial, they're
he
not going
now
to listen.
finds the cave's
This is this
darkness
idea.
disorienting and struggles to discern the once familiar shadows on the wall. The other prisoners, misconstruing his disorientation, surmise that his journey into the outer world has left him imbecilic and blinded, thereby rebuffing his attempts to liberate them vehemently.
Emerson said this idea best. To be great is to be misunderstood. Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras were misunderstood. So why should I want to be so why should I be want fuck. So why should I want to be understood? I ruined that so bad.
Plato presents this passage as an intricate metaphor, symbolizing the predicament of a philosopher tasked with enlightening the masses. He asserts that most people not only find solace in their ignorance, but also exhibit hostility towards those who challenge their preconceived notions. There are many ways in which one can interpret Plato's allegory of the cave, each perspective having its own profound teachings. After all, this is what an allegory is all about. Reflecting on real-world events, Socrates...
The greatest thing about this allegory is it can be taken in, I think you just said this, but you can take it in so many different ways. When you are misunderstood, know that you were right. But not necessarily. I think it's just we shouldn't wrap up our self-worth with how people view us. We should wrap up our self-worth in how we view us. Like when you know something in your heart is what you believe, who cares if 10 years later it gets proven wrong? Like that authenticity is meant. That authenticity means more than anything that anyone else can give you. Some people take that out of context. What do you mean?
Plato's mentor, was condemned to death by the Athenian government in the same way that the freed prisoner was attacked by the cave dwellers. His crime was the disruption of societal order by questioning...
So the death of Socrates is something that is talked about by pretty much any philosopher that's any sort of notoriety. And it's perhaps the same level as the crucifixion for a philosopher. What I mean by this is the death of Socrates is the idea that it's better to live in a world, or it's better to die than live in a world where you can't speak. It's better to live in a world where you're authentic, you're yourself. It's better to die than live in a world where you can't be authentic in yourself. I keep fucking messing it up. This is like one of like the most important things that any philosopher will ever teach you, and I keep, you know. But yeah, it's the idea that Socrates was given the out. Socrates was given the ability to live in exile for his crimes, but he would rather live in a world where he could be himself. You know what I mean? He'd rather die than live in a world that nothing that really brings him joy, nothing that really is anything of his essence can be spoken.
Prevailing norms. So, to fully comprehend the allegory of
Take
the
a breath.
cave, it's vital to
I'm not even like
situate it within its
nervous. I'm just
historical
like my brain
context
stopped
and
working.
connect it to the broader philosophical tenets espoused by Plato. Emerging from a period...
Ready? I'm so nervous. However many people are in here stressing me out.
marked by vibrant intellectual inquiry and cultural development in Athens, Plato's allegory encapsulates his metaphysical and epistemological viewpoints, deeply influenced by his mentor Socrates. Around the 5th century BCE, ancient Greece, and particularly Athens, was seen as a hub
I'm
of
not actually
intellectual
nervous.
innovation and discourse. This
My
era,
brain is just like,
often called the Golden
I'm trying to like fill in the next sentence before I finish this sentence. I'm moving too fast today.
Age of Athens, saw a proliferation
I think
of
that's
philosophical
I think
inquiry
that's
into
Spinoza.
areas such as ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. In the midst of this intellectual climate, Socrates propounded philosophical methods emphasizing critical thinking and logical argumentation, upsetting the powers in charge. While Socrates never recorded his thoughts, His philosophy and dialectical method are reflected in the works of his student Plato.
Isn't it so crazy that we know who Socrates is, but we don't know a single word he said? Like how Plato characterizes him could be completely different than who he was. It's really just more so his death that is um his greatest testament to his life, his work.
Plato's philosophical worldview is primarily documented in his dialogues, where he explores various philosophical questions through the voice of Socrates and other characters. The Republic, which contains the allegory of the cave, is one of his most significant works,
That's something we're gonna
focusing on
circle.
justice.
I just it's they're the older philosophers, they're not as interesting as um I don't know, like Taoism is probably the most interesting philosophy. Camus is pretty interesting. A lot of these ideas you'll get summed up in other works. I know it's you should really always go to the source, but you can learn a lot about their ideals simply through reading Beyond Good and Evil, because basically Nietzsche just explains what's wrong with every single philosophical system and just slanders it, but you can get a baseline understanding of it from there. You can also get it summed up by Camus. A lot of philosophers they talk shit about other philosophies, so.
And the ideal society. The allegory of the cave is nestled in the middle of the Republic.
I re I read the Symposium by Plato, and I literally just I was like, I'm not reviewing this. It was there was like 10 pages worth reviewing, and like the first 40, 50 pages were literally just about these Greek guys with their little boys that they were obsessed. I'm not even joking. It's like talking about the love of just it made me so uncomfortable reading it. I'm like, is this ever gonna get good? And it really didn't. Dude,
Presented
I
by
was like
Socrates as a
I was so excited. I was like this because I heard someone online say this is a great book, and I'm like, all right, I'll get this book. It's very short. I'll finish it in a day. It was so fucking like like the symposium is literally just it's like a dinner party where everyone's talking about love, and like the first half of the people are literally just talking about loving their young male servants. It's just oh, it's fucking weird. Like I know it was a different time. I know like different things are normal, but like I couldn't get past it.
metaphor illustrating his theory of forms. According to Plato, the empirical world we perceive with our senses is merely a world of appearances, a poor copy of the real world of forms or ideas. These forms are the eternal, unchangeable, perfect archetypes of the imperfect, transitory things we perceive in the world.
So this is the idea that the when we think of a rose, we think of a perfect image of a rose. We don't think of thorns. Like I think Alan Watson and Osho put this very well when they were talking about the idea that the moment you try to define a rose is the moment it loses its beauty. The moment you begin to explain it, begin to explain the chemical reactions that create the flower, that create the thorns, is the moment it takes away from it. And this pure ideological form is the idea that Plato puts
The
forth.
cave prisoners, chained and observing the shadows on the wall, symbolize humanity's predicament in the empirical world, misled by illusions and false appearances. The freed prisoner represents the philosopher or the enlightened individual who perceives the world of forms, gaining true knowledge. When he returns to the cave to enlighten others, he embodies the philosopher's responsibility to educate society even in the face of resistance or hostility. In this context, the allegory is a vivid encapsulation of Plato's philosophical ideas, a profound meditation on the nature of reality, the pursuit of truth, the philosopher's role, and the transformative power of knowledge. Turning from the philosophical landscape of ancient Greece to
I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick. I'll be back in a minute. Take us with you? No. I take my whole setup. That'd be doing too much. I think I'd get banned for that too, right? Maybe if I was on Kick, I'd be fine. All right.
To its rich mythological tapestry, we encounter a narrative bearing remarkable parallels to Plato's cave allegory, the myth of Prometheus. This tale, steeped in ancient lore, recounts how the Titan Prometheus, whose name means forethought, rebelled against the gods to steal fire, a symbol of knowledge and civilization. Prometheus, an ally of the mortals, recognized their disadvantaged state in a world where the gods withheld vital knowledge. In an act of defiance and compassion, he stole fire from the gods and delivered it.
Gave them fire knowing the punishment would be as severe as possible. Sacrificing yourself for the benefit of the entire human race. This is this
To
idea.
humanity. Fire, in this context, symbolizes knowledge, enlightenment, and the spark of civilization, the critical element that elevated humans from a state of primal vulnerability to becoming creators and innovators in their own right. This act of knowledge transference has clear echoes of the journey undertaken by the freed prisoner in Plato's allegory of the cave.
I think the best example of the sacrifice is Socrates, though. Just from a philosophical sense, obviously you can look into Christ, but um, the idea of Socrates is the individual is more important than um, living in a world where you're not yourself.
The prisoner, upon discovering the world beyond the cave, returns to share this newfound knowledge, akin to Prometheus bringing fire to humans. In both narratives, the central figures undertake a form of hero's journey, venturing into an unknown realm, be it the world of sunlight or the realm of the gods, gaining a transformative tool or insight, and returning to their original realm to share this knowledge. However, the dissemination of knowledge isn't met with gratitude or celebration in either story.
It's never met with anything good. Look at Snowden, look at Julian Assange. Any sort of whistleblower, they're never celebrated and they're never appreciated. Most people don't even know the impact they have. Um, it's really like a thankless job.
Prometheus faces severe divine punishment for his transgression, bound to a rock and
This
subjected to
from
daily
Plato.
torment.
No, this Prometheus is it's a mythological story. Plato, the only thing from Plato here was the death of Socrates and the cave allegory.
By an eagle. Similarly, the enlightened prisoner, upon returning to the cave, is met with disbelief and hostility from those still enchained. These narratives underscore the trials and tribulations often faced by those who challenge established perceptions and strive to illuminate the path to enlightenment. At the same time, the hero or the philosopher must understand that some people are not yet ready to leave the cave, so they must be patient.
You can't save everybody. This is something that anyone that wants to do good in the world must understand. There's a certain subset of people that will never face any fear, will never face any sort of difficulty. They'd rather live in the hell that they've created. And you have to put all your time and energy into people that are wanting to be saved. You know what I mean? It's like it's something that sucks. It's something that I wish wasn't true. But there are some people so wrapped up in their own suffering that they don't want to look that there's a way out. They don't want to accept anything more. They want to be stuck in the same situation so that they can keep complaining for the rest of their lives. They can keep blaming everyone else for why their world is unfair, why nothing good ever happens for them, instead of saying, I can do something. I could do the bare minimum. I could do something today to make my life infinitesimally small amount of better, of good in my life. I can bring something good in my life. Even if it's just you take one mindful breath, even if it's just you take one breath and forget about everything around you, that would do more good for so many people in this world, but no one will ever do this. How old is the book Plato wrote? However old Plato is. Uh, 375 BC, so like 2,400 years ago. I haven't read the Republic. This is something I want to read at some point. But again, I read the Symposium, and I need to prepare myself for fucking Plato again.
Patient and empathetic.
I know the ending where Socrates talks about love is really insightful, but the beginning is just it's just too weird for me. I can't deal with that.
In these parallel journeys of
What?
Prometheus and the cave prisoner, we can discern an exploration of the transformative power of knowledge, the courage required to defy established norms, and the resilience needed to withstand the societal resistance often faced by visionaries. Drawing these comparisons allows us to not only understand the shared themes of these ancient narratives, but also recognize the recurring patterns of human experience they represent. These are what we call the universal archetypes.
I mean, it's still relevant to this day because people haven't changed. For however much technology has advanced, people have become people. If anything, people are less advanced because they rely on systems more than they ever have. Back in the day, you had to kind of reap what you sowed more. Back in the day, you kind of actually had to do things. But nowadays, you can be in this country and be unsuccessful and have everything handed to you. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing. I think it is a good thing because it's the safety nets are there for people that really need them. But at the same time, if you never get past these safety nets, then you never experience what all of life has to offer you. And I think the human being that doesn't have any agency will always be unhappy. I think it's very hard to be a human being and not do things for yourself and be any sort of happiness, have any sort of happiness. This is what you see in Walden, particularly. If you read Walden, the entire point of the book is that Thoreau has a cathartic experience of going out into the woods and doing everything for himself. The idea that he relies on himself only, he doesn't look to anyone else for anything, is pure bliss, pure happiness. His thoughts and philosophies are impressive. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's Plato, dude. You realize that every single like value we have is based off Plato. When the Bible was rewritten, it was infused with Plato's ideologies. So a lot of the things that we understand as like a universal value, it comes from Plato, it comes from Socrates. I think they were called the humanists. I think that's what it was. Um, they basically like infused philosophy into the Bible. And then these philosophies began to affect things like laws, like culture. And I mean, we see a dissolution of these laws and these cultures and a shift away from more traditional values and more traditional acceptance. And this goes to the Nietzschean idea of God is dead and man killed him. Like when we get away from these ideals, we have to replace it with something better. And there hasn't been a better option. There hasn't been anything that is freeing to the individual. It's all just let's give all responsibility to the government and then expect to be happy. But the more power you give to the government, the less you take, the less power the individual has. And the less power the individual has, the more unhappy they are. It's just like it's basic human nature, but for some reason people can't seem to grasp it. I mean, you'll never be happy relying on someone else for anything. This is the same thing in relationships. Like, how could you be happy if all your happiness is derived from someone else? All they need to do is get slightly mad at you and then your life is ruined. Like, what's the point of that? Like, I want to be happy so that I can spread this happiness to the person I love the most in the world. That should be the ideal. That should be what we're striving for. So very like we flipped a lot of the things on its head, and it's the answer is always in old philosophy. The answer is always in books that are still in print hundreds or thousands of years later. But people are just so fucking lazy they won't pick it up. So I mean, it's if you want the answers, they're all just there. Like people that talk to me, they're like, "Where the fuck do you learn all this stuff?" And I'm like, go to the library, go to Barnes and Nobles, go on Amazon. Like you can get all this information readily available for not that much money. Like I've probably spent like $2,000 or $3,000 on books in the past year, in the grand scheme of things, for the information I gained, for the insights I've gained, you know how much therapy would cost is probably the same amount. And I've learned way more in my studies than I would ever have learned in therapy. I'd probably be more fucked up now if I went to therapy because I would have been told that none of this is my fault. Nothing that has happened to me is because of me, and you just need to learn to come to terms with it. What is the name of his book? Plato has a bunch of different books. His most famous is The Republic. Um, he has the Symposium. He has the five discourses. One of them is Apology, I think it's called. That's the death of Socrates. The Republic. Uh, I don't know if this is its own book. Symposium, Apology. Phaedro is it includes some of these are parts of each other. I'm not sure exactly how many. Most of his works were lost to time though, and that's the real unfortunate thing of things. Same thing with Pythagoras. A lot of Pythagoras's writings were basically destroyed. Um, Probably intentionally because he had probably one of the best philosophical systems ever. But yeah,
As mentioned earlier, the hero's journey is such an archetype. The hero's journey is a narrative pattern identified by scholar Joseph Campbell in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It outlines a universal motif of adventure and transformation that runs through virtually all of the world's mythic traditions. The hero's journey unfolds in three stages: departure or separation, initiation.
I don't know about the laws of your country, but in America, they have this thing called public domain. So anytime an author dies, everything that they've done becomes public domain 70 years after their death. So like in America, all of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stuff is public domain. That's why you see so many reinterpretations of Sherlock Holmes. It's because it's completely free to build off of that character. It's completely free to add to that universe. Like it's no longer a intellectual. It's no longer a piece of intellectual property. You no longer can get sued for using it, for getting the manuscript. So there's a lot of resources online that will give you this stuff for completely free, especially because Plato is so old. I'm sure you can either go to a library or just look it up online, um, completely free. Like most of the books I read, you can find online for free simply because I don't read anything that was written this century. I don't think anything that was written this century has anything to offer me because it's all politicized. Everything you read nowadays is going to be shaped by the worldview that we're in. And I think it's just such a short-minded worldview that everything is political, that everything is agitated, and everything is so aggressive. Like, no. Like, you can get every single essay by Emerson online for free. You can get probably Walden online for free. Anything that's like 100 plus years old, generally you can get it online for free. So just know that in future for advance. I don't know what the laws are in your country though. And that's just America. You'd have to do research to figure out the policies, but I'm sure it's something similar. Most of the websites are banned. Oh shit. Damn, okay. Do you have a library nearby? I don't know. That's the thing. It might be a little different for you, just simply because you're a country. I don't know anything about Syria, so I don't know if it's restricted when it comes to that sort of stuff. But Plato doesn't really say anything that's religious. All of his stuff's philosophical, so it might be completely okay. I don't know though, dude. To like when you get into that kind of stuff, it's very like wishy-washy. I'm not sure what would be banned versus what wouldn't be banned.
And return. In the departure stage, the hero leaves their familiar world and ventures into the unknown, often following a call to adventure.
Oh, American
This
websites are
stage
banned.
resonates with the enlightened prisoner's departure from the cave and Prometheus's journey to the realm of the gods. The initiation stage is marked by various trials, confrontations, and revelations, leading to a
See,
climactic.
we don't have anything that like would be banned, but the way our search engines work is it only shows you what's popular. So like a lot of this stuff is like given a spin. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm sure you'll find something somewhere. It's such an old book that I don't think it would be restricted, but I'm sure you can figure something out.
Experience that grants the hero new knowledge or power. In the allegory of the cave, this corresponds to the prisoner's exposure to the sunlight and realization of the true world beyond the cave. For Prometheus, it's his acquisition of fire from the gods. The return stage involves the hero's journey back to their familiar world, bearing the wisdom or power they've gained, intending to share it with others. In most stories, the return involves a final trial, which tests the hero's ability to impart that knowledge. This echoes a crucial aspect of the hero's journey. The transformation often incites resistance.
Skip more. You want to keep listening to this, or I think it's just getting repetitive. Let me find something good. See what? Yeah, yeah, okay. That's the thing of it. Like the cave allegory is pretty simple. I don't think you can really do more of a cursory analysis of it because it's all what it means to the individual. That's what most of this stuff is.
A bitter
There's something to be said of leaving room for interpretation. This is what Emerson does so perfectly. When you read Emerson, you realize Emerson could have wrote entire novels, entire encyclopedias about his ideas, but he should leave room for interpretation because that's what makes his work so meaningful today. His works are so meaningful today because they can be read by anyone throughout all time because it's just so open ended, and each individual will take something new away from Emerson, and that's really what is missing nowadays. Everything needs to be so matter of fact. Everything needs to be so. If you do this, you'll get this result. It's like I don't, I don't want to do anything that's going to get me a defined result because I don't want to know where I'm going. I want to be surprised when something new happens. I want to be faced with new challenges day after day. I don't want predictability. I want chaos.
cucumber, throw it away. Brambles in the path, go around them. That is all you need, without going on to ask, so why are these things in the world anyway? That question would be laughable to a student of nature. Just as a carpenter or cobbler would laugh if you objected to the sight of shavings from their work on the shop floor. Yet they have somewhere to throw their rubbish, whereas the nature of the whole has nothing outside itself. The marvel of its craft is that it sets its own confines and recycles into itself everything which seems to be decaying, growing old, or losing its use, and then creates afresh from the same material. In this way, it
Like everyone raves about Marcus Aurelius, everyone raves about Stoicism, but I just see it as a watered down version of Taoism.
requires no substance other than its own, and has no need for a rubbish dump. So it is complete in its own space, its own material, and its own craftsmanship. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome at the end
But
of
then
the Roman
again,
Gold.
the reason why everyone loves Stoicism is because it's watered down. Most people aren't capable of parsing out the deep value that is Taoism, the deep value that is the Tao, the nature of things. It's very, very sad that like the most basic philosophy is the one that like every guy is like obsessed with. It's like if you like one philosophy, maybe you should explore more. Maybe you should make your own philosophy. Maybe you should stop adhering so rigidly to one set of beliefs.
Golden Age, from 161 to 180 AD. He was notorious for being a humble leader and Stoic philosopher. His meditations, originally written in Greek, have been translated into nearly every language and serve as a source of inspiration to millions.
Seneca's
Yet
so
he
much
never
better.
intended for his writing to be published. It was never meant to be read by anyone. In fact, he wanted his writing burned after he died. There was no motive
It's
or
like
agenda
Kafka.
behind this work, other than to serve as an internal dialogue of wisdom from his higher self to his lower self. Each and every one of us has this internal split.
Dude,
The higher self
it was his affirmation journal. It literally was when you think about it.
being the conscious, rational mind, and the lower self being the subconscious programs, behavior patterns, and impulses. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man on earth for 19 years.
Stoicism is showing no emotion. It's not really. That's like that's how we use the word stoicism. That's how we use the word stoic. To be stoic is to basically show no emotion, to be even keeled. But the idea of stoicism is absolute rationality, absolute rationalizing things and putting a positive spin on it. And actually, it's not a positive spin, it's an indifferent spin. So, like, if something good happens, knowing that something bad's going to happen in the future. If something bad happens, knowing something good is going to happen in the future. When you're celebrating, you must be even keel. You can't get too high or too low. It's an okay belief system, but I just think it's, dude, what's the point of victory if you can't celebrate it? What's the point of being with family if you can't be completely happy? You can't be engulfed in the moment of joy. You know what I mean? Like we should be experiencing pure bliss at all times of the day, and that's what Taoism gives you. But Stoicism is like, no, don't be extremely happy because one day things are gonna go wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. Maybe I'm putting my own spin on it, but that's how I perceive it to be. I think the only great Stoic philosopher is Seneca. I think Seneca. When you read Seneca, it's not just the baseline level of wisdom. It's like your grandpa is dropping the most truth bombs that you've ever experienced. One of Seneca's main ideas is he's growing old, he's becoming reduced capacity, he's not really moving as well, and he said, "This is a good thing because I've done everything in my life. I've experienced every aspect, and now I get to experience my oncoming death. And with these oncoming deaths, I begin to become more introspective. I become more aware of my demise so that each moment becomes more and more valuable. It's a very interesting way to approach things, and that's something that I can agree with. Whereas I don't know, the rest of Stoicism kind of just seems like a lesser form of other belief systems.
He could have satisfied every desire of his lower impulses: sex with anyone, wine by the boatload, mountains of gold, unlimited temptation, and yet he did not disgrace himself. He did not live scandalously like almost every other ruler we know about in history. Marcus concerned himself with virtue, honor, philosophy, and serving the common good. He stands as history's shining example that absolute power does not always corrupt absolutely, which is why Meditations is still
There's
relevant
other
nearly
examples
2,000
that are
years
history.
later. This video will focus on one of the essential teachings of Marcus Aurelius, the power of
It's usually
indifference.
like in the East, though. It's usually not in the West. One of the weird things to me is like people don't get why I think it was Caligula, right? Yeah, Caligula made one of his horses a senator, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's crazy. He made his horse a senator." And when you really look at why he did it, he just thought the Senate was a bunch of fucking jokes, and it was just a bunch of rich people just complaining about why things weren't going their way. And irregardless of the other stuff he did, it was a pretty funny move. Like, I mean, dude, I would laugh so hard if like a constituency literally elected an animal to be the representative because that's how smart our representatives are. Like, wouldn't that be the ultimate fuck you? Wouldn't that be the ultimate like you guys do a terrible job? That's really what he was doing. But I mean, you can call him crazy. It is a crazy thing to do. But when you look at the context of it, it's one of his only things that you can justify.
Marcus Aurelius emphasizes that we must be indifferent about things that make no difference. This may seem like an obvious statement, but the power and depth underlying this idea cannot be overstated.
This is just how it. What a thug. Isn't that so badass when you think about it? Like I've heard it I've heard it that way of like this guy made his horse a senator. It's like no, it was the Senate was a fucking joke and he wanted them to know how worthless they were. Like that's the point of it. It's like the only thing you can do, the only thing he did that you're like, all right, this is actually kind of hilarious. Like it's just showing that even back then the ineptitude of the politicians was just as bad as it is today.
Indifference is not the same as not caring. It is not about being numb to life, nor is it about ignoring our emotions. Indifference is a separation of your higher self from physical reality, emotions, and thoughts. It is detachment from the outcomes so the rational mind can observe events from a clear distance. Much of our time is spent worrying about the small stuff. We find things to complain about or obsess over, not knowing that these things bear no impact on our life in the greater context. Change is the only constant. Change is inevitable. Our attachment to things that change is what causes us suffering. It is our resistance to change that causes us stress.
Yeah, and this can be best just explained by Taoism. When you clear your mind of everything, then like when there's nothing in your mind, then you have access to everything. When you when your mind is completely empty, this is when you're connected with the eternal, the infinite. Um, I think that makes much more sense than trying to rationalize things. I think there needs to be some paradox of the more you try to understand, the less you really know. The more you try to describe something's nature, the less you understand it.
Marcus Aurelius writes, "They kill, they cut in pieces, they hunt with curses." What relevance does this have to keeping your mind pure, sane, sober, just? As if a man were to come to a spring of clear, sweet water and curse it. It would still continue to bubble up water good to drink. He could throw in mud or dung, and in no time the spring will break it down, wash it away, and take no color from it. How then can you secure an everlasting spring and not a cistern? By keeping yourself at all times intent on freedom and staying kind, simple, and
I think it was Heraclides that said it. I think that's how you say his name. He said, "You can never step in the same river twice." And this is the idea that nothing will ever be the same. This is the idea that life is one never-ending stream, and you just have to go along with it. You can't try to keep things the way they are, and you can't force things because it's just things are going to happen, and you have to just, for lack of better words, go with the flow.
decent. How do we keep our mind pure and sane? By
Osho
being
said,
indifferent to
"You can't
everything that
step in the
doesn't
same
matter.
river once." Hopefully I can explain this idea. You can't step in the same river once because the moment you step in it, the water that you were trying to step in is already past. The moment is already past. That's the idea. Anything you try to define is already changed. It's already become something new.
By letting go of everything we can't control. By understanding the temporary, fleeting nature of the material world and focusing your mind on things that are eternal. In this way, you will see your place in the greater cosmos. You will see that on the highest level, everything is part of a balanced order. Within our bodies right now, there is a war happening between our immune system and parasites. Yet we sit here breathing, functioning, and taking it all for granted. On a psychological level, there's a mental health crisis, an addiction epidemic, depression, anxiety, loneliness, and
This
hopelessness.
is just like
On a cultural level,
it's hitting at interesting ideas, but it's not getting to the root of them. It's not getting to the depth of them. And that's my issue with Stoicism. I think it's a good idea, but it pure rationality is neglecting the human need for faith, the human need to believe in things without any sort of proof of them. I mean, time and time again, we can look at any great work of art. Every single great work of art was produced from faith, was produced from hope, was produced from some unknown force, some belief in something greater than them. It was the expression of the Christ consciousness of God, of the collective unconscious, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't spring up from an individual, it springs up from the eternal, the infinite, whatever it is. You can never step in the same river twice. No, I didn't say that. That was Heraclides. Don't give me that quote because I don't. I think it's a good quote, but um, I don't know. Maybe it's not the greatest example. Osho's quote's better.
there's political division,
Give me
collapse of
Osho's
empires,
quote.
wars, riots, protests, civil unrest, environmental destruction, and a plummeting birth
Yes,
rate.
there we go.
But on a
You
cosmic
spelled
level,
my name wrong
the world
still,
is
though.
spinning, and all the planets are
I'm
orbiting the
Dino.
Earth
I'm obsessed with
in perfect
dinosaurs, right?
harmony. It's like in nature, when a giant redwood falls. Some would call it a tragedy, but it also creates space for sunlight to hit the forest floor, and seeds, which had been laying dormant, are now able to burst into life. All is part of a greater whole. All is part of a higher order.
So I just start saying like ancient philosopher quotes so that people think I'm smart. Because no one's gonna know. No one except like some history professor somewhere will know. but like he won't have the same audience as me. So like there's no way I'll ever get phone. Dude, I'll just start like word for word copying everything and no one will even know. I just
If
let
only
one
we had
slip.
eyes to see it. Like Confucius wrote, everything has beauty, but not everyone can see it. When you detach from the outcomes, you will discover an invisible thread that connects the microcosm to the macrocosm, and you will see a beauty in everything. Marcus Aurelius writes, we should attend to things like these, observing that the incidental effect of the process of nature has their own charm and attraction. Take the baking of bread. The loaf splits open here and there, and those very cracks, in one way a failure of the baker's profession, somehow catch the eye and give a particular stimulus to our appetite. Figs likewise burst open at full maturity, and an olive ripened on the tree, to the very proximity of decay lends a
It's like you hear these words, they're cool. They are. It's just it sucks because I know there's better words. That's the thing. That's my main issue with it. Again, I'm just a hater of anything popular, but I think it's a very limited perspective. There's fundamental truths that Stoicism gets at, but it doesn't get at the entire essence of things. You think you'd be famous till some point when somebody's no, I always give credit to people even when I shouldn't. So, uh, I mean, if you look at what's his name, Jordan Peterson, he just cites Jung all the time. Any insightful idea Jordan Peterson has, it's because he read Jung. Um, you can see it in all of his work. Um, I mean, I'm sure he has his own ideas. I'm sure he has his own interpretations, but the things that really move me, I just know it's Jungian psychology, the unconscious, the anima. These sorts of ideas are, I mean, things that not to say that if Peterson was studying this stuff before Jung, he wouldn't have come up with it, but I just think you have to build on past people's ideas and bring them a new context so that new people can understand them. And that's really the thing I'm trying to do. It's like I want to be the bridge between you and your learning. I want to be the bridge between you and Jung. Like if you just go into Jung and you don't know anything about him, then it's not going to make sense. Whereas if I explain my baseline understanding of him, like there's people that have studied Jung their entire lives and there's actual experts. I understand Jung simply because I study esoteric philosophy, I study other philosophy, I've studied Jung himself. Like my perception is very leaning to the mystical elements of him though. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I can only offer such a good explanation of him, but I hope my explanation is enough to inspire you to go read him yourself, and then begin to understand him in your own context. So, but even if you get exposed for parroting other people's ideas, I don't think anything happens to you. I want to be the bridge between you and your learning. That's an interesting quote, but it's not moving. I've written some things that'll be like, wow, just no one's seen them yet. So I wrote a quote yesterday. I'll read it out loud. I don't know if it's a good one. I was writing something along the lines of, uh, where was it? Okay, it was this one. So I was writing something. It's called "Conformity is the Greatest Sin," and the last paragraph like gave me chills, so I just ended it there. I was gonna write more, but I was like, I can't end it any better than this. So the ending goes, in Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, he said to be great is to be misunderstood. I would take this one step further. To be misunderstood is to be yourself. Damn. I'll let you process that. No, I'm just kidding. It's very simple. The idea is that when you're yourself, you're great. Everyone's born great, made what they are. And it's trying to get back to the state you were born in, trying to get back to the state that you were born perfect but made imperfect by society. That's the idea. Yeah, I'm starting to lose my voice. I think I'm gonna end the stream. because if I lose my voice today, then I can't stream the next few days. Um, Want to talk about anything else before I end it, or did I bore you? I'm gonna try to. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I have to be more consistent or whatever, but I mean, right now I'm just having fun doing this stuff. It's just fun to do. I stream for about an hour, 40 minutes. I've been streaming for like less than an hour, so um, we'll try to get up back to the longer time. It's just easier when there's like 20 people in here, and I can just when I get not when I run out of content, but like it just gives me more to go off of, so it's just easier that way. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for having a good time. I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good rest of your night. And I'm gonna release a video the second I end this. Well, actually, not the second I end it. I have to make a thumbnail. But stay tuned. The video's coming out very soon.